The off-payroll working rules, or IR35 as it's commonly known, isn't new. It's been around since April 2017. The reason why it's getting so much attention at the moment is because there are changes in the private sector where the responsibility as to who does what is going to change and bring it in line to what happened in the public sector back in April 2017. This is the big change in the legislation. And what's happening is the responsibility for making that determination is moving away from the contractor, and it's becoming the responsibility of your client. So the end client is the one that's responsible for deciding whether you're deemed inside or outside of IR35. So if you're deemed inside of IR35 or in scope of IR35, there are a few options available to you. You could potentially carry on working through your PSC and have your invoices paid on a net basis, so have your taxes deducted at the source. You could potentially become a PAYE member of the agency you're working through, or you could potentially work through an umbrella company and become a PAYE member of the umbrella company. The reason why I say potentially in front of those options is because your client might actually have a policy that restricts what avenues you can go down. So the key is to speak to your client, understand how you can engage in the future, and then take financial advice to understand what the best option for you is. So if your client hasn't yet communicated your status, my recommendation is talk to them, understand what timescales they're working to. We've recommended that our clients communicate status as early as possible so everyone has time to process what it means and do any admin that's required to get things in place. The absolute drop dead date of getting a status through, though, is really going to be the 5th of April. You really want to know well in advance with them, but by the 5th of April at the absolute latest, because the new legislation comes into effect from the 6th of April, and you'll want to know what your status is before you go into work that day. Otherwise, you don't know how much you're going to be taxed and how much money you'll receive. You can absolutely challenge your IR35 status if you feel it's incorrect. It's one of the changes in the legislation that have come in versus what we saw in the public sector. So when 6th of April comes, you have the right to challenge. That right extends to either the fee payer or the contractor themselves, and then the end client will have 45 days to respond to that challenge. So you can retain your personal services company. There's nothing that means you have to shut it down as part of the legislation, regardless of whether you're deemed inside or outside of IR35. What you might find is some clients will say that you cannot engage through the personal services company for that engagement. So if you're working with a specific client, there's a PAYE only policy, then you won't be able to use it. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to use it for future assignments with a different client. There's an unavoidable cost impact of being deemed in scope of IR35, which potentially means that your daily rate will be impacted. The reason why I say potentially is because it really comes down to the client's ability to absorb the costs associated with IR35. And what we're seeing in the marketplace at the moment is the vast majority of clients can't afford to absorb the costs, which then means the costs effectively flow down, resulting in a lower daily rate to the contractor. There are some clients that are picking up the costs, but these tend to be on a very exceptional basis and for skills which are extremely rare in the marketplace. The vast majority of what we're seeing at the moment is the daily rate for the contractor effectively being reduced due to the impact of IR35. From the 6th of April 2021, you'll potentially receive a new contract. And the defining factor will really be your IR35 status, whether the client's determined you to be out of scope of the legislation, in which case you'll be able to carry on your existing terms, on your existing day rate, or potentially if they've deemed you to be in scope of the legislation, a new contract will be required with a new day rate as part of it. And that will come down to whether the client is able to absorb any of the costs with IR35 or not. So it's very unlikely that the April 2021 go live date for changes in IR35 will be delayed again. The reason for that is because the legislation is now passed through Parliament. It was part of the Finance Act that was passed in July 2020, which means to delay it again this time would require a further parliamentary act to unpick it, which wasn't the case 12 months ago. 12 months ago, the HMRC and the government just had the ability to delay it as they saw fit. So if you're deemed in scope of IR35, what it means is you're being taxed like you're an employee. So it's a tax status only. It doesn't entitle you to any employment benefits. So you won't receive holiday pay, you won't receive pension, you won't receive sick pay. All it means is you are going to be taxed as if you were an employee of that company.